Welcome to the Happy You, where you're going to learn about patterning of positive psychology. Now, in this particular session, what we're going to learn about is kind of a mystery. Why is it that we can read books on happiness and learn an awesome exercise about happiness, like writing a thank you note, and it works great. But as we keep practicing it over and over again, it seems to lose its effect. Well, the reason why that's occurring is because there's really two kinds of happiness. There's one that's sustainable and one that's fading. There's one that comes from inside of us, and there's one that comes from outside of us. And there's one kind of happiness that we all desire, but it's the other kind of happiness that we put most of our effort and labor into getting. Let me give you a quick example of what I'm talking about. So, let's go back to the gratitude letter exercise. Now, there's a lot of great research on this that shows that people, before they write their gratitude letter, may take a baseline reading of their level of happiness. And then once they wrote the letter, they'll see a spike in their level of happiness or well-being. And that spike, though, after they've written it, a few weeks go by, and they find that their feeling of positiveness diminishes. Well, within a few months, it's gone and stays gone. Now, there's other exercises like meditation, for example, that show a completely different result. Here, we do a baseline. Hey, how's your level of happiness before you start meditating? And then we measure again after they start meditating. And we find that right after they start meditating, there's not really a rapid change at all. But within weeks and over the next few months, there is a huge increase in their level of well-being, and it stays up and it stays positive for long periods of time. Well, what's going on? We're seeing two different things. Well, what's happening is we're seeing two different kinds of happiness. Exogenous and endogenous. Pretty weird words, right? Well, exogenous comes from the word exo, which is like exoskeleton, like we see on an ant. It's from the external. And genus means basically that the beginning or starting point of our happiness comes from external events or external experiences. Where endogenous is completely different. Endogenous, or endo, means inside or an interior state. And it's from the interior state that these feelings of well-being really root or come from. Exogenous would be, examples of that would be drinking, movies, TV, video games, sex, girls, food. All of those things would be the kind of experiences that would create pleasure. But the pleasure really wouldn't last. And probably those kind of pleasures often create addiction because we're seeking them again and again and again. But endogenous happiness may involve experiences, but the experiences aren't always positive. Like we saw with the meditation and even in exercise. I love the way I feel after I exercise, but while I'm exercising, it's not so much fun. But what that does is creates an internal state, and that internal state helps me feel good. So, in a real simple nutshell, the external happiness comes from outside. It creates a feeling of flow, so we have that feeling of happiness, that pattern of happiness, with our energy up and our energy out. But it's all externally focused. But inner happiness has that same feeling of flow, but this time it originates from inside of us. Now let's put this all into kind of practical pictures, all right? Imagine for a minute you're going to Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, right? But then imagine that it rains. Do you think that's going to put a damper on your mood? Well, absolutely. But what if you came to Disneyland in a positive mood? You came already happy. Well, even if it rained, you'd probably be singing in the rain, and you'd make the best of it because you brought your happiness with you. Let's look at a couple problems with the exogenous or the external happiness. One is called hedonic adaptation. Again, that may sound kind of weird, but basically what it means is that the first day I go to Disneyland, it's going to be fun. But if I go to Disneyland for the next 6 days, 8 days, 10 days, it's not going to be fun anymore. I get used to it. I adapt to it. It's not pleasurable anymore. The second problem with this external kind of happiness is it's really not even happiness. It's more pleasure. When I'm experiencing the experience itself at its very best, I'll be feeling good. But when that experience is over, when Disneyland is done, I am tired, I'm exhausted. The next day I may be even cranky because I am just worn out. And while I was there, it was maybe good, but once I leave, the pleasure goes away. The last problem that we have with this external happiness is where control is. Again, as we saw, if everything lines up perfectly at Disneyland, then we'll be okay. But if there's any problems, if it rains or it's too crowded, it's not going to be fun because we have an external locus of control. Well, with our endogenous or inner happiness, those problems don't exist. There is no adaptation. Nobody ever gets bored with being happy or feeling positive about their life. And again, it's a state. It's a state of being that comes inside. So it doesn't just there one moment and then gone. It's lasting. It's sustainable. And lastly, it's an internal locus of control. The control for being happy comes from inside of me as a choice. If I know the patterns on how to create happiness, I can choose those patterns, create that internal happiness, and bring joy to any situation. Doesn't that sound great? There's a lot of activities that help us be happy. But if we approach these activities from an external point of view, we're going to get a completely different result. If we approach activities from the external happiness focus, what we're going to be looking at is experience. And what we're going to be particularly looking at is the pleasure that that experience creates in us. And bottom line, we're looking to get something. We're looking to get a good feeling. But if we come from the internal happiness, what we're doing is creating an internal state. As Martin Seligman talks about, we're creating values or we're building our own internal character. And it's that building of character that helps us feel positive. Once we start building character, then it starts a positive cycle upward, like Barbara Fredrickson talks about, building and broadening. But it's all based on what we give to the activity, what we bring to the activity. And that's really the difference. One is all about getting an experience, and the other one is about the quality of life that we bring to the experience or give to the experience. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Brett Williams, licensed psychotherapist, and you have been learning about patterning, a positive psychology. Take care.